Coming up on this episode of the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise podcast.
In theory, if you're absolutely 100% sure that you didn't do anything wrong, you can respond to the questions, but generally lawyers say do not respond because most people talk themselves into a greater criminal culpability when they start answering questions. But to a parent, I would just advise the parent.
Welcome to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise podcast with Dr. William D. Choctaw, MD, JD. A special episode featuring attorney Bernie Brown, former Los Angeles deputy city attorney, who's also an author and a podcaster. You've got questions, he's got answers. So join us as we listen in on Bernie sharing his facts, his wisdom, and his knowledge. So let's get started. Here's Dr. William T. Choctaw, MD, JD.
So if you were to summarize, again, let's go back to the hypothetical. You're invited to speak to the city council at UCLA, and they're planning to have this demonstration for whatever issue they do. They're going to have it for. What general advice would you, in summary, sort of give them?
Well, there's no precise advice.
Okay.
But generally, I would say, first of all, set a time and a date and a location. A location, if the location is going to be on campus, I would limit the hours. I would make sure that everybody understands, if possible, the rules.
Okay.
That is, that we're going to have a demonstration, that we're not going to violate any laws, that we're going to leave at a certain time, rather than, because, they set up encampments at UCLA, right, and they were there overnight.
And that could theoretically go forever, when you have an encampment.
Right. And we're not going to obstruct operations or the business ongoings of the school. We're not going to interfere with anything. We're just going to go there. We're going to give our speeches. We're going to make our statements. We're not going to interfere with anybody. We're not going to use profanity toward anybody. We're going to be totally peaceful. We're going to tell everybody exactly our time limits, and we're going to let everybody know that our restrictions and everything, that our limitations, and that we're going to leave at a certain time, and not overdo our welcome.
And could you, and just in summary, because I want to make sure that I get all this, just read through your first 4 or 5 main topics and give me a summary to those. Where are you talking about? What rights do demonstrators have? When do you cross the line, go too far? Just sort of like a summary for each one of those.
Well, demonstrators, as we found in the Constitution of the United States, we have the right to free speech and the right to freedom of assembly. And so that's constitutionally protected.
Right.
Now, so those rights are there, but they're subject to limitations. And the limitations are if you violated any laws, or if you are on property where at some point the property owner decides that they no longer want to give you permission to be there, and they declare that you are trespassers and ask you to be removed. So you cross the line generally. When do you cross the line? When you violate any laws.
Okay, makes sense.
When you refuse to leave when being requested to leave. If you're using loud and unreasonable, you're too loud, you're using profanity, you're fighting, you're tearing up stuff.
Got it, right.
Damaging property. Then you've gone over the line.
And some of that is sort of common sense, that you have to be respectful, I guess, of the environment and those around you, but still make your point or give your opinion and that sort of thing.
Yes, but the rules are not clear cut, and they're constantly going through, shall we say, a metamorphosis. They're constantly changing. The Supreme Court is constantly frequently getting new cases.
Got it.
That's going on throughout our entire history of the nation, where they would be receiving cases and being required and requested to interpret the law and the Constitution and to set the rules with regard to what is permissible and what is not permissible.
Right.
And so it sounds real beautiful to say, oh, we have free speech. We can criticize the government freely. And yes, we can.
Right.
But it depends on how we do it and where we do it and when we do it. That determines whether we cross the line and go too far.
And I think your comments about when you were in China and you asked or you said, do you have free speech? And they said, yeah, we can say anything as long as we don't criticize the government.
Yes. And they were pretty serious about that. Because they said, well, when you're in your own home, they said that sometimes there were like, I don't want to call them spies, but neighbor would rat out a neighbor, shall we say. If your neighbor heard you criticizing the government, they could report you to the government and you could get in trouble or get prosecuted based on someone saying they heard you saying things that were critical of the government. So, it's interesting to live in a free country where you can say things. It does create, I think, in the long run, a greater discussion and analysis, and ultimately leads to policies that are better for the nation. I think down the road, but during the process, it can be disrupted.
Sure.
And I think the reason why governments in other nations don't allow it is because they're afraid of the consequences.
Okay.
In this nation, we've learned how to voice our opinions, state our differences, and yet keep the nation together. Not fall to pieces, not turn into a civil war.
Exactly.
So far we have. Sometimes I wonder how long that will continue. I hope it will continue throughout all history.
Well, they call democracy, I think, an experiment.
Yes.
So far our experiment has held. But I think it will be tested as time goes on.
Yes, looks like it. It looks like we're coming up for a nice test in the next election.
Yeah. Any other comments, Bernie, you want to share with us?
No, I just want to say that you're doing a remarkable job. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It is a great contribution to the community for people to hear your great words of wisdom. I keep having this nasal drip.
That's okay.
And congestion. So I'm looking forward to your podcast, podcast that you'll do on how to clear out my nasal.
We'll certainly work on that.
How to get rid of this nasal drip and congestion.
Well, it's called springtime and pollen. That's
right.
And so you're probably getting that ocean breeze anyway. So that
ocean breeze is everything. But you've done so many podcasts. Like I said before, you did that one on artificial intelligence, and I thought I'd never understand artificial intelligence, but you broke it down and made it understandable for the common man like me. The common person.
Well, we thank you also, as I said before, that because, particularly with legal issue, because you are on the worked on the prosecutor side, that's a unique perspective, I think, than most legal perspectives that one would get, certainly that I would get. And I think that's helpful. I mean, I think that gives us extra knowledge. And with a certain honesty and openness to say, okay, these are your choices, A and B, but you need to be clearly aware of what those choices are and not be fooled by thinking that, well, you can do A and get away with it. It's not that big a deal. It is a big deal. It is a big deal. And those choices are clear. And so you have to decide.
Yeah, tough choices when you're in college and you want to fight for things, but then you put in all these years and all this study, and you don't want to get expelled.
Exactly.
Oh no!
And let me ask you: do most of these students get expelled? I mean,
I don't think so. I think the vast majority of them do not get expelled. At my law school, when we put on our big demonstration, I didn't hear of anybody getting expelled. There were a couple of people that got like suspended, shall we say,
right.
temporarily suspended or whatever. But no, generally not. But I do believe that if you're charged with a more serious offense, like, battery or assaulting an officer, or
Right.
fighting or something like that, the chances of getting expelled go up significantly. You run the risk of expulsion. I heard that at some of the colleges back east, they were considering expelling some of the students who participated in the demonstration.
If you were advising parents, let's say little Johnny called home and said, "Mommy, I'm in jail because I was at a demonstration." Well, what would you advise parents to do?
They're in jail because of a demonstration? Well, most of these students that are in jail are generally cited out. That is, they go there, they get booked, they get released within 24 hours.
Okay.
It's usually they don't hold them in jail unless they've committed a more serious misdemeanor or something that arises to a felony. So usually they're going to get out. And so usually you would tell them, just don't, like the lawyers always advise, don't talk.
Don't say
silent. Exercise your right to remain silent.
To remain silent. Okay, that's good advice. But yeah, I want to. Can you actually say that? I choose not to speak until my attorney arrives or my mom.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
When you're being arrested, they have to give you your Miranda rights and advise you of your right to remain silent and tell you that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, and on and on and on. They have to tell you that when they arrest you. And then you can say, and then they'll start asking you questions.
Right.
And that's when you can say, well, I'm exercising. You just told me I have the right to remain silent, so I'm going to remain silent. Now, in theory, if you're absolutely 100% sure that you didn't do anything wrong, you can respond to the questions, but generally lawyers say do not respond because most people talk themselves into a greater criminal culpability when they start answering questions. But to a parent, I would just advise the parent, obviously, if the child is not going to get out of jail anytime soon, bail would have to be set. And as a parent, I would be trying to make bail so my kid could get out of jail. Be like, oh, okay, I'll make jail. But then at some point, they would have to face my wrath.
Exactly.
You did what? You were tearing up what? You painted on the administration door building? Why? You don't have the right to vandalize their building. You can't do that. I'd be, doing the parent thing.
And I think for our audience, it's fair to say that I know you have at least two kids, and I know one is a doctor and one is a lawyer. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, so I think you did some things good.
I got lucky, and God blessed me.
Well, but I think all of us want that type of luck, and that's
yes.
Go ahead.
I was able to give my children a lot of good counseling because of my childhood.
Is that right? In what way?
Well, I could say to them what happened to various children on my street.
Right.
I told them at a very young age. I said, okay, there was a guy down the street. His name was Joe. Mm-hmm. He was the king of the kids. But as he grew up, at some point, he got hooked on heroin.
Okay.
And when he got hooked on heroin, he wound up in jail. And then he died. And then I went down every child on the street because I could tell them each child's story.
Good.
There was Mr. Butler, Ricky Butler, or Stanley Williams. Stanley Williams was he was a good, smart kid, but now in his story, he got hooked on crack cocaine. He wound up homeless.
Wow.
And so his story was a bad story, but then I had good stories. There was Daryl Goss and the Goss family, Goss brothers. One of them, they were both good kids. They worked really hard, and one of them wound up being an accountant. One is a certified public accountant, and the other one's a lawyer.
Okay.
So you go down. Oh man, I had a story for everybody, for all the kids. There was a kid who across the street, Tidwell, Orlando Tidwell. It's terrible. I'm naming names. A lot of these people are dead, so it won't. I can't be saying.
Understood.
But what happened to Orlando? He concocted the scheme to break into this tire store on the corner. He was a teenager, and so he went up on the roof, and he entered at night. They had experienced several break-ins, so they had hired a security guard. When Orlando came down, entered the building through the ceiling to try to steal whatever he was going to try to steal, the security guard shot and killed him.
Wow.
So, I mean, you share all these stories I was able to share all these stories with my kids about success stories and stories of people who were not successful. And so then they could evaluate for themselves, to some extent. It's like,
how do you make sure as a parent that you get through to your kids? Because a lot of times as kids get older, the last people they want to listen to are mom and dad type thing. It says, well, you're sort of old school and things have changed and blah, blah, blah. How do you break through those barriers?
Well, kids are generally very intelligent. They're really smart. And if you tell them, just say, okay, here are the logical consequences of your actions. If you do this, this is what's going to happen to you. If you do this, and if you do this, this is what can happen to you. And if you just explain to them, and the beauty of it has been, in certain cases, where I said to them, if you do this, this and this and this will happen. Okay? And they did it anyway. And then the first thing happened, and they said, oh. And then the second thing happened, and by then they were like, okay, I'm going to stop doing it. If it's not, it wasn't too late.
Right.
They were able to see that, going down that road of conduct was going to lead to these consequences.
Right.
And they thus avoid those consequences. But clearly, there's no just precise way because there's so many factors.
Right.
I was into, to some degree, controlling who my kids hung out with.
Okay.
Because their friends can really will have a great influence on them.
Sure.
If they can hang around out with good people and people who were good kids, doing good things and positive and achieving and wanting to do the right thing. Now, you don't always know what their friends are doing, but generally, if they can hang out with positive, good friends, then that helps them. That helps them to be groomed as compared to hanging out with thugs and gangsters and all of that. I still remember the day my son came home. One day he was getting up to go to school, and I happened to be there before I go to work, and I looked, and he had on these pants, and they were bagging below his butt. And I said, usually thugs wear that kind of, you sure you want to go to school with your pants like that? This was a thing.
Right. I remember.
It was a thug gang thing.
Right.
I said, it really doesn't look cool. I don't think you should do this. And, do these gangsters and thugs and that's who does that. Is that the way you really want to look? But I didn't tell him, no, you can't do it.
Right. but you let him know that you were not supportive of it, and
Right.
he basically got
And
the message.
that it wasn't, in my opinion, and he stopped. We did it that one
good.
day. I think he may have realized what he was doing, and it didn't happen again.
So, and is he the one that's now the lawyer?
He's the doctor.
He's the doctor.
Yeah, right.
The lawyer was smarter.
The girl, yeah, she was smarter. But we all make mistakes, and even as growing up in my story, I'm reluctant to tell my story because I grew up in South LA and I was surrounded by gangs and drugs and all of it going on. And I hung out with a lot of guys. And, my mother had me going to Sunday school all the time. So that was good because that gives you a moral basis.
Yes. And that's important.
Yeah. Because in certain communities, there are a lot of temptations, and your friends are saying, "Oh, come on, man! This is good marijuana. You can try this stuff, man. You know." And just so many stories of stuff. There was a guy, that same guy, Joe Houston. We had a group of kids, a whole group of us. We had a club called Fisherman's Cool, and we would all meet at Joe Houston's house in his garage, and we were all cool and everything. But one day, see, I was a little younger, so they didn't ask me to participate. But they decided that there was a local I think it was called Boys Market. I don't know whether you remember those. Anyway, they decided they were going to go there and rob the market.
Oh my goodness!
The grocery store.
Right.
These are, young teenagers.
Wow.
But because I was only about 11 or 12, they said you can't participate. But they let me hear all the stuff. They were planning it and all this.
Right.
And they went there and did it.
Oh my
and they all got caught and arrested.
Of course.
So, there's all these influences around, and I'm lucky to have gotten out of that. I was surrounded by drugs and people who were committing crimes and all that kind of stuff. So,
and it just shows that even if you are in that environment growing up, there's hope, and then now you passed on that next generation that will be at that next level.
Yes, and I think a lot of judges take that into consideration. My wife's a judge, and I think they take into consideration because there's some judges who say, "Oh, you've been charged with this crime, blah, I'm throwing the book at you, you go to prison, blah, you're going to be gone forever." There are others that say, "Okay, I see some hope in you. I think there's a chance," So, and they might I'll give you a chance to reform and to get it right and to change your life and go in a different direction. So there's a lot of discretion where we can help people in their lives so that they can have successful, happy, healthy, and wealthy lives.
Indeed, and thank you so much, Bernie. Because I'll go. that's a good way to end it. We want everybody to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. And when we say healthy, we're talking about mentally, spiritually, and physically. That health is more than just physical. But again, Bernie, thank you again for your valuable information and your equally and more valuable time to share your words of wisdom with us. And certainly anytime you have any other thoughts on any subject that you would like to share with us, just let us know that there's always time and a time slot and a platform available for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. You have a terrific day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise podcast with Dr. William T. Choctaw, MD, JD. Be sure to check out other great episodes covering areas of health, wealth, and wisdom at thhwwp.com. And while you're there, be sure to check out the books, blogs, and other literature in your preferred format. And don't forget to leave a review, subscribe, share, and support the podcast. That's at thwwp.com. You've been listening to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise podcast with Dr. William T. Choctaw, MD, JD.